Hi, my name is Christine. Welcome to my channel. I like to read dark and disturbing things, and this is going to be a new vlog. So, earlier this year, I read a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, and that was called What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I'm sure most people have read this by now, and I can never get enough of this cover, and also the inside. Freaking gorgeous. So I read this and I was like, oh yeah, I need to read the original Fall of the House of Usher. But have I done that? No. However, Netflix has out a new series. I think it's just called The House of Usher instead of The Fall of the House of Usher. I thought I should probably read that before I watch the show. Now, I have no idea what the show is about. I don't even know if it's actually a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher, only because that's a short story, and even this was longer than the story, and it's not that long. So I don't know how they can make a whole show about it unless they completely redid everything. But I did glance at like the titles for the episodes, and each title is basically a name of a poem or a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, with the exception, I think, of the first one. I think it's just the first line of The Raven, if I'm remembering correctly. Last year I got this book, which I think you can still get. I will link it down below if you can. But I got this really cool Poe book. Got the heart on the back. And I thought this would be a perfect opportunity for me to read some Poe. I honestly have not really read any Poe since I was in school. And I remember probably my favorite that I can remember is The Cask of Amontillado. That was not one of the episodes, I don't believe. So what I'm going to do is, for each episode, I'm going to read the poem or short story first, then watch the episode, and I will kind of compare and see. It may have nothing to do with it, I'm not sure, but we'll find out, and it will give me a chance to read some Poe, and I can kind of let you know what I thought. So we'll see how it goes. This might fail spectacularly, but I'm going to have some fun reading some of these as I go along. So I will read this and then watch the show and let you know what I thought after each episode and related short story or poem. So I'll check back with you later. All right, so I have watched the first episode on Netflix before reading anything, because the first episode was called Once Upon a Midnight Dreary. And although that is the first line in a poem called The Raven is actually going to be an episode later on. And so I am going to wait and read that for that episode. So I watched the first episode, and it is basically just introducing us to Roderick Usher, who is like the head of this family and also the CEO of some huge pharmaceutical corporation that seems all evil and is being brought up on all kinds of charges for causing some opioid addiction problems, which, yeah, I have a pharmacy background, and this is all just parallel with other things going on in real life. And basically he says he will confess to all of these crimes, but only if like the DA sits and listens to his whole long story of what happened. And so I think the whole long story is going to be what we see each episode. So he lets us all know that his children, he has like 6 children, I think he says, from 5 different moms, and they're also unlikable right from the beginning. And we don't know what's happened to them. We just know that they're no longer with us, and he's slowly getting to this story. Now, I don't know how much I should really talk about the show because it'll contain a lot of spoilers moving forward. But the next episode is called The Masque of the Red Death. I feel like I've read that, but I can't remember exactly what it is about. So that is in my book. Ooh, it has a cool artwork in there. Sorry, I got distracted. So it's just a little over 7 pages. So I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to let you know my thoughts about all the things that I read. And then I will watch the episodes and let you know if there is anything to do with the story in those episodes. I have a feeling that there's not going to be, but there's definitely a lot of little, like, I guess, Easter eggs or nods to Poe within the first episode anyway. Just a lot of the characters' names, like one's just named Lenore, and I think some of them are just plays off of other characters from his works, as well as one of the characters is named after Poe's mother in real life. So yeah, I think there's just going to be a lot of nods to Poe and to his works, and a lot of them that I probably am not even going to get. But I just thought this would be a fun way to experience the show and get caught up on reading some of this. And so I will be checking back with you and let you know what I thought of the short story. And then I will watch the episode and just let you know if there's any kind of connection there. I don't want to ruin the show for anyone that hasn't watched it since it's fairly new. So I will check back in with you later. Okay, so I read The Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. And let me just preface this by saying I'm going to talk openly about the short story. So there will be spoilers for the story. However, I will not spoil the show. This has been out for a while. And I feel like you can't really spoil Edgar Allan Poe because it's not so much what happens as it is the journey and the way that he tells it. So just because you know what happens will not take, I don't think, anything away from reading the story, just because, I mean, it's his writing and it's the whole atmosphere of it. And this was a fairly short story. So this is a story about a prince named Prospero who is living in a time where there is this plague called the Red Death. And basically, if you catch this, you're dead within like 30 minutes. A horribly violent, just a bad death. You do not want the Red Death. They say like you're bleeding through your pores, out your eyes. Like, it's not a good way to go. So he decides that he is going to gather all of his rich friends and have them come over for a big party at his castle, where he will basically be quarantined from all of these horrible peasants that are full of disease. So they're going to shut themselves in and they're just going to party. And they're not going to worry about all the other people that are just dying left and right. So there is a lot of the writing in these pages is describing the castle in which he has this party set up. And it's set up in 7 rooms so that you walk from one and you like, I believe you like turn a corner and it's almost like a little bit of a maze as you're going through. And each room, it has a different color. So it's set with like a stained glass window with a light behind it. So let's say that the room is yellow or blue. It's really just the stained glass with a light shining through to make everything in that room kind of have that same color and that same vibe. So there's a lot of, I was really interested in that. It just sounded really cool. I don't know what the symbolism is for those different colors, but there's a lot of theories out there. And then the last room is all in black, like black velvet shrouded in black, but the window is red. So it is like a blood red scarlet shine onto this black, very gothic sounding room. And then every time the clock strikes like on the hour, everybody goes silent. The musicians stop playing, people stop talking, no one's laughing. It's just quiet during that time. And it just has this very eerie feeling. It makes you very conscious of time ticking away. So there's not a lot said about any of the characters, not even about our prince, just that they are secluding themselves from the rest of society and dealing with this problem by just avoiding it and feeling like they are safe and secure in this party while everybody else is dying miserable deaths. So the story comes to a head when, oh, I forgot to mention, this is a masquerade ball. So the story comes to a head when this figure comes through that just is getting everyone's attention, and it has this horrible like death mask on, and he's slowly making his way through all of these colored rooms, and he's getting everyone's attention. And Prospero's just like, who do you think you are? And he comes to come at him and just drops dead. So very much a story just about the inevitability of death and how futile it is to escape. You cannot escape death. Death does not care that you're rich. Death does not care that you're some prince. Death doesn't care how important you are, how nice you are, how anything is gonna happen. It's gonna come for you eventually. Basically, it's these wealthy people thinking they can use all of their wealth to create this world of their own that they can live separately and not deal with all of these problems. But death showed up at their door and was just like, guess what? Yeah, you didn't invite me, but I'm here and you can't do anything about it. So after I read the short story, I watched the episode, which is episode 2. Wow, this was an episode. This was very sexually charged. This is all about the backstory. I'm getting the idea that each one of these episodes is going to be about one of his children, and it'll be tied into like a whole bigger story. So this story is definitely does not seem like it is retelling the fall of the House of Usher. They are very much just taking this idea of this Usher family, and each episode will have nods to different Poe stories and poems. And I would say most of this, I did not get the Masque of the Red Death until the very end, but wow, yeah, it definitely connected at the end. We are following his son Prospero, who is named after this prince, and he is very much trying to prove himself. I don't know if he's the youngest, but he seems like he's the youngest in the family. He's very much trying to prove himself as that he's important as all these other wealthy, pharmaceutical, evil types in the family. And he wants to prove his worth by throwing a big party. Basically, it seems like all he does is his whole life seems like it's just money, drugs, and sex. And that is what this party is going to be. He's going to throw the biggest like orgy party that the world has ever seen. And he has a very select group of people that he is inviting. Again, creating his own world with his wealth. There is a saying that they talk about in this show, and he's like kind of thinking back to like a comic that he saw where it said, what is the golden rule? And the golden rule is that those with the gold make the rules. And yeah, that is exactly what they're trying to do. Prospero is trying to make his own rules and create his own little world because he has all the money. He wants to prove how important he is by doing this. And he throws this party, and there is a guest that he did not invite there. And guess what? They are wearing a mask of death. And only in the show, it is a female in lingerie, whereas it was a male just dressed really scarily in the book. The only thing scary is the skull mask, but again, it is a masquerade in the show. And it is just like this feeling that the wealthy are completely untouchable. They don't have to play by the same rules that everyone else does. They don't have to follow the same laws. They can always get out of things because they have money. Now, the thing that I was kind of hoping that they would do in the show was I really wanted to see those rooms in different colors, and they did not do that. But they did do a room that was all in red lights. So it was very dark, but all the actors are in red lights, and they did that very well, which I suppose was the most important room out of the 7 rooms. However, I would have liked to see the whole thing, just as a nod to the short story. But yeah, he has his run-in with death, and it was very interesting. There was a lot of body horror in this episode, especially at the end. There was a lot of sexual depravity, a lot of manipulation. So far, I'm really liking this. I like the second episode a lot better than the first, and it looks like it's just setting up for every show to be a really messed up backstory to each character. So the next the next episode is called The Murders in the Rue Morgue. And this is a longer story. This one's like 40 pages long, so that's going to take me a bit longer to read. They did already allude to this Rue Morgue in the show. I think RUE is like the initials of one of the children in the show, and they have like this testing facility where they test on animals. So if you're sensitive to that, please check trigger warnings. The siblings kind of joke that it's not really a testing facility, it's a morgue because so many animals don't make it. So I have a feeling it's going to be a lot of that. So I'm going to try to get through this tonight and then watch the show tonight, and I will check back with you tomorrow. Okay, so I have both read and watched the episode that was titled The Murders in the Rue Morgue. So this was a longer short story in here. It was about 40 pages. And so in the story, it starts off where Poe is really just talking about the analytical mind, and he's just I had to use a dictionary at times. I had to look up some things and really slow down the first like couple pages where he talks about this, because he's really using that poetic writing to describe people who are not just smart but analytical. And this then leads into him talking about how he met this guy that has a mind like this. And then the story is way more digestible and easy to read. And he's basically hanging out with this guy, and this guy is so smart that he could tell, like they're just walking in silence for like 10-15 minutes, and he tells the main character, you're thinking about this. And he's like, how could you possibly know that? And he will go through all of the things that they've passed by on their way that would have triggered this memory, that led to this memory, that led to this thought, that led to this thought. And he's just like, dang, okay. I guess it's the whole setup for this guy being very Sherlock Holmesy. And apparently this story is credited as being like one of the first detective mystery type stories that there ever was. It ends up being about these 2 women that get murdered in their house. It was a mother and a daughter, and for whatever reason, this character is just allowed to go into this crime scene, and he's like, oh, the police can't figure it out, but I can. And they just let him go in there and he figures it out. So he goes in the house, and the police have pretty much said, you know, we found these 2 bodies and there was no way that anyone could have left the house. All the windows are shut. All this is, it's a mystery. I'll spare you the details about how the bodies were found because it was kind of gruesome and pretty cool to read about. So I'll save that for you. And this guy basically breaks down how this happened, and the end result ends up being something completely ridiculous that that involves, it ends up being something that was not human that caused these murders. And how he's able to figure this out is just, it just seemed very Sherlock Holmesy to me. It was not my favorite because it didn't seem very Poe to me, except for the beginning where he's kind of waxing poetic about the analytical mind. So it just wasn't my favorite Poe story, but it was a completely different genre for him as well. Okay, so then I watched the episode that was named this. And so one of the children is dating a doctor, a surgeon, and she is behind doing this experiments, all these experiments on some kind of device for the heart to help people with a very specific heart condition. She has like this testing facility where they test on chimpanzees. It has already been kind of joked about in the previous episode that they call this the Rue Morgue because it's called the Rue Laboratories or something like that, but because they're joking that so many of the testing animals don't make it, they just kind of call it that. You kind of already know how this is going to play out. I did not know that the character that was going to be involved was not the person who was conducting all of these studies. However, it was the daughter named Camille, and her job in the family, she seems very Kardashian to me, but her job in the family is that she is like the PR rep. She does all the spinning for keeping all of these rumors under control and like turning the narrative into what she would rather it be once it gets to the media. Like most of the Usher family, she's not very likable. She's quite brutal and blunt and very self-centered. And part of that selfishness is that she does not like her sister. I think her name is Victorine, that the one that does all of these studies. So she is going to pull some dirt on her, and she is going to go into the lab and take all kinds of pictures and bust her basically on doing something that she's not supposed to be doing. And that is where it comes to a head. And I will just leave it at that. It ends quite brutally. There is, again, body horror. There's quite a few jump scares in this as well that got me. And there was a conversation between Roderick, who is like the head usher of the family, and his sister Madeline. Sometimes they'll show them when it'll do like past and present. And there was a conversation when they were younger, like in the early 20s, just trying to make it, where Madeline is telling him a situation of walling somebody into a wall and having, the mortar and the being the person on the outside that is doing that to somebody. That for me very much foreshadowed another Poe story called The Cask of Amontillado. And as I find out later, another story that we are going to be reading next. So I thought that was kind of interesting that was they like to drop a lot of just Poe references in there without being, I think if you didn't know, you wouldn't think that it was an odd conversation. So this was not my favorite story or my favorite episode, but it was just trying to get the story to move progress along a little bit more. And I'm still really liking the show. It is brutal. There is an actress in here that it was also in, I think in The Haunting of Hill House it was. And her name, I looked it up, hopefully I'm saying this right, is Carla Gugino. She is phenomenal in this. She is this character. She was the woman in The Masque of the Red Death with the mask. And as it turns out, she plays many different characters within this story, where for each of the children, she is just a different person to them. And once she's basically death. Once she's making contact with them, you pretty much know their number's up. And she just does a phenomenal job at I love seeing like the same actor do different parts, and she does them so well, and I'm really enjoying it. So I will be back. The next one on here is called The Black Cat. I don't believe I've read this before. And then I'll watch the episode and I will check back with you. Okay, so I have read A Black Cat and watched the episode. So Black Cat is a short story than the last one. I think it was only about 10 pages long, and it is about our main character starts off telling us how he has always been known as like this very sensitive kind of guy, like even when he was younger and as he grew up, and he had a strong affinity for animals and having lots of pets, cats, dogs, rabbits. I think he says even a monkey at some point. And he meets his wife, and she is the same type of nature. So are happy in their little animal loving life. And he says he falls victim to a disease, alcoholism, and basically his entire personality changes. He starts getting really mean for no reason, and he's mean to his wife. He's mean to everybody. He's just irritated with everyone, and eventually he starts becoming mean to his pets, and particularly his cat named Pluto. So his cat named Pluto, that kind of still sticks by his side, like is the last one that like feels the wrath of his anger towards the world. And one day he gets violent with this cat and does something to one of his eyes. Eventually, one day, kills this cat. Now, the night that he kills his cat, there is a huge house fire, and he wakes up. And when they go back to the home to see what's left, everything is gone except this one wall, and it's the wall that was like behind his bed. And on there, scorched, is like the shape of a cat. And he just gets really freaked out by that. So they move on. They now have to find a new little place to live. And one day a cat ends up really liking him and follows him home. This cat has like a splotch, like it's completely black, except it has a splotch of white like on its chest area. And as time goes on, he thinks that this splotch is looking more and more like an actual image, the image of a noose, or he says the gallows. So he's just like, what the heck is going on? So he decides he is going to kill this cat as well. And one day he's going down into the basement, and the cat causes him to trip or something, and out of anger he grabs a knife and he's about to kill this cat when his wife intervenes, and she ends up getting it instead. Well, now he's got a mess that he needs to clean up. So he decides to take care of this by walling her up in the house to hide her body. Sound familiar? Well, the police come by a few days later, and they're looking for her, and you know, he can't believe that he's completely fooled the police. They're about to leave. They're like, okay, there's obviously nothing here. When he's just like, boy, let me tell you, the construction on this house, knock, knock, is great. And like knocks right where he buried, or he entombed his wife, into the wall. And they hear a sound from within the wall. It was just like the stupidest thing. So they like tear out all the thing, and they find not only the wife, but the cat as well. And the cat was what was making the noise in the wall. So it reminds me a lot of Telltale Heart. Also reminds me of Cask of Amontillado. And in my copy of the book, there was this wonderful image. So he had like knocked on the wall, and it knocked peace out here. And we have this lovely image. You can see the cat's missing his eye. So yeah, this was more classic Poe that I was used to, and I really enjoyed this story. Then I watched the episode of Fall of the House of Usher, episode 4, and I didn't mention, but earlier, I think in the episode before, one of our sons, I think he goes by Leo, but his full name's Napoleon. He's not really part of like the whole family business. Like all he does, it seems to be, is drugs, alcohol, and play games. I think he's a gamer, in like that's his profession or whatever. That's what he does. And he has a place with his boyfriend who has a black cat. And in a previous episode, he, you know, wakes up the next morning after doing a lot of drugs and finds the cat dead, but with a knife and lots of blood. So he figures he did this, and he hurries up and he cleans it all up before his boyfriend wakes up, and the cat's been missing. So that's how we start this episode, where they're looking for this cat, and he has to go out and adopt a cat to trick his boyfriend into thinking he found Pluto the cat. In the end, this cat ends up driving him mad, and he thinks he can hear the cat within the walls, and he takes a giant Thor hammer, Mjolnir, whatever it's called, and just starts smashing in all the walls to find the cat. And it does not end great for him. This episode to me was a lot closer to the story. We have both of our characters with substance abuse issues and then kind of going crazy in the end, being driven crazy by a cat that you're not sure is actually really a thing or something that only they are seeing. And of course, we have the same actress I was talking about, who is the person who adopts the cat to Leo. And yeah, just any scene with her is amazing and I love it. I would say that out of all of the children in the Usher family, that Leo is probably the most likable, only because he doesn't seem like a mean person. I mean, he has his issues, don't get me wrong, but I guess he is selfish in his own way in the way that he acts, but he's at least upfront about it, and he's not like mean. He's not going out trying to hurt other people. So the next story, the next episode that comes up is The Telltale Heart, which I have read. I think that probably everyone has had to read this one in school at some point, and it's a good one. So I am excited to reread that one. It's been a long time, probably high school since I read it. So I will read that and watch the episode, and I will check back with you later. Okay, so episode 5 was The Telltale Heart. And I think probably most people have heard of this story or know relatively what it's about, so I won't go into too much detail. And it's a pretty short story. So The Telltale Heart is about this man who, I think he's living with another man or has a neighbor or something. And he gets along with this guy. He likes this guy. He has nothing, there's nothing about him that would cause him to want to harm this man, except he just realizes that his eye really bothers him. It sounds like this old man has cataracts, and for whatever reason, our main character cannot get over this and just decides he is going to kill him. I want to point out just how unhinged this main character sounds to begin with. The story starts off, "True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad?" And he just sounds freaking gone to begin with. And he's just a nervous wreck, and he's just nuts. Well, he kills this old man, and when he does, the man kind of lets out a little bit of a yell or a shriek. And the next day, the police come by to investigate because a neighbor said that they heard a yell in the middle of the night. So after he kills this man, he hides the body under the floorboards in his home. And the next day, when the police come by to check out a complaint by a neighbor that there was a loud noise in the middle of the night, he shows the police around his house. The police look around, they see nothing amiss, and they're just kind of sitting around talking with him. And all of a sudden, he starts to hear this noise that no one else seems to hear. And it's growing louder and louder and louder, and it won't stop. And he can't take it anymore. He ends up giving himself up, saying, the old man's here, he's under the floorboards, and his guilt just gets the best of him, and he just couldn't take it anymore. So it reminded me a lot of the Black Cat story, except for in that story, where the main character was just so proud of himself for getting away with something that he ends up accidentally giving himself away. In this case, it is his guilt that he just can't take it anymore, and he gives himself up. Now, the episode that is based off of this is one of the ones that I think follow the story pretty closely or get the same main idea through. So in this episode, we are following the daughter named Victorine. She is the one that is dating the heart surgeon, and she has helped develop or fund or whatever this heart device that she's trying to get approved, and she is not ready for human trials yet. As we found out in previous episodes, it was not going so well in animals, but that's not going to stop her because she is just determined to be successful and to make this happen. It doesn't really help that Roderick Usher, her father, has the exact same heart condition that this device would help if it worked, and he has put a lot of pressure on her to make it happen so that she can save his life. So not only is she trying to prove herself as like this independent woman, she's also trying to prove herself to her father and to the family that she is important. She's considered, I guess, lower on the rung of siblings. So she is just determined to make this happen. She comes across a patient of her girlfriend's who is the heart surgeon, and she has the exact condition that is needed for the human trials, which, you know, are not even approved. And the patient is the same actress that is playing Death or the Devil or whatever you want to call her throughout the series. It is her, and she convinces her to sign up for these trials, even though they are not safe. So upon Victorine telling her girlfriend what is going on, her girlfriend, understandably, has a bad reaction to that and just says, "You're crazy. Like you've let this gone to your head. This is not the way it should be." And things go downhill from there. They end up breaking up. There's a fight, and from that moment forward, Victorine can't get a hold of her girlfriend. She keeps trying to call her, and she starts to hear this ticking, thumping sound wherever she goes. And I think you could see where it is going. This ended in some spectacular visuals, body horror wise. This show has been great for the body horror and jump scares. And I really loved how this one stayed very true to, I mean, not 100%, but it stayed very true to the story. So that was really fun to read. I also watched episode 6, and that episode was called Goldbug. That was the only short story that was not in my Poe book that I own, and I was able to find it online, and it seemed like it was quite a bit lengthier. I think part of that was I was reading it on my phone, but I think it was 40 or 50 pages. And this is another one of the kind of detective type stories. It starts off with a man that finds a scarab, and he finds also like a map that kind of goes along with this, and figures out that this is the key to solving like a treasure map. And so he and his friend go on this adventure of figuring out these puzzles to get the treasure. Again, this was not a favorite story of mine because I prefer the Poe that I know, like the dark stories. And while I can appreciate it for what it is, it's just not my thing, and that's okay. The episode that was named Goldbug in the show was episode 6, and this one does not have a whole lot to do with the story at all. This one focuses on, so now we're down to the last two children, his original children, his daughter and his son that he had with his wife, his first wife. I wish I could remember her name, but I don't. To me, she was like the most forgettable character. She didn't get a whole lot of screen time before this. And this one is about her and her self-destruction, basically. She is starting this company that is called Goldbug, and that's the only reference that I could get from this. Maybe there's more to it that I just didn't catch on to, but this company is supposed to be like a healthcare type company for rich people. Kind of reminds me of Goop plus Peloton plus like Fitness Marshall. So she has subscription boxes where she sends beauty products out, but also there is a component of exercise to it where her husband comes in. He is like she calls him the mascot of the company, where he is like leading people along on exercising through, I'm guessing, streaming or some app or something. She treats her husband horribly, just awful. It is, I mean, all of these characters are pretty awful to people, but he basically does whatever he thinks will make her happy and is just there to keep the peace. And he seems to truly care about her happiness, and she's got him doing some questionable sexual activities with other people where she watches. Not to kink shame fake characters, but it's weird. I didn't understand it. So she's under a lot of pressure. They are about to launch this product and her siblings keep dying off, so She is not getting a lot of sleep. She's not sleeping at all, actually, and she's starting to hallucinate a lot of things that are going on. She's becoming very paranoid, and she says some awful things to her husband and decides just to break it off, that she doesn't need him. She tells him basically how worthless he is in her life, and she can handle everything herself. There's a lot of things going on in this episode that are forwarding other plot lines, but in the end, we come to the part where she is launching her product and she just completely self-destructs. This had some amazing lighting going on in this episode, especially in the scenes where she is home alone at the end, and there is some very graphic, just a great graphic death scene. So all in all, this episode did not have anything, unless I'm missing it, to do with the story other than using the name as the logo for like their company. All right, we only have one sibling left, or one child left, and 2 episodes. The next is The Pit and the Pendulum. I'm excited for this one, so I will check back with you after I have read and watched the last 2 episodes. All right, so I have read The Pit and the Pendulum, and I've watched the episode 7, which was called The Pit and the Pendulum. So the short story is about a man who is sentenced to death during the Inquisition, and he promptly passes out from this news, and he wakes up in a dark, he doesn't know where. He's somewhere that is pitch dark, and he is trying to figure out what's going on. He doesn't know if this is some form of torture or if he's about to be brought to be hanged. As time goes on, while he is in this dark, he's falling in and out of sleep, and sometimes he wakes up and there will be food and water, and when he drinks the water, he usually passes back out. So one of the times he wakes up, he decides he's going to walk around like his cell or wherever he is, and because it's so dark, he's just going to count like how many steps just to see what the shape of the room is or how big the room is, just trying to figure things out. And during one of these, he ends up tripping and falling and realizes that he's on the ground, but his face is not on the ground, that there is a hole or a pit in the middle of his cell, and he could have fallen in and died that way. Another time he wakes up and he feels like he is strapped onto like a board or a cot or something, and he can't move, but now he can see above him there is this swinging pendulum with a blade at the end of it, and as he's watching this swing back and forth, he realizes very slowly is descending, and it is aimed like right at his heart. So he knows eventually this thing will drop down far enough to slice him in half. And it is the torture of watching this thing slowly come at you. Imagine it's already bad enough knowing that you're going to die, but then for it to be just not knowing how you're going to die and slowly watching this thing come at you. So he does eventually get out of that situation, and once he does, the blade goes back up and the walls start coming in, and it's just one thing after the next of this impending doom. So then I watched the episode called The Pit and the Pendulum, and this is now focused on the only child that is left. His name is Frederick, or as the other siblings call him, Frodrick, because he's kind of like this bumbling idiot. And I had at first thought that he actually wasn't so bad. He seemed to be very into his family. He seemed to love his wife, his daughter Lenore. He liked to spend a lot of time with her, and he actually seemed like an all right guy. He's just like next in line to inherit everything, and so none of the other siblings think that he really deserves it, just because he's kind of, you know, he's just this idiot. So in this episode, we are exploring his life a little bit more, and he was this family man until he realizes that in that second episode with Prospero and his big orgy party, he finds out that his wife was there, and she is now injured from being there. Like, she's lucky to just barely be alive. And he realizes that she was going there to be unfaithful to him. And this is just slowly causing him to unravel throughout all of the episodes. His jealousy is just getting the best of him. He thinks that everything is a lie, that she is all a lie, wants to know where her wedding ring is, can't get over the fact that she does not have her wedding ring, like that was not brought back with her. And he is just bit by bit losing it. He starts treating her poorly as well as his daughter. He starts doing drugs and things are not going well for him. We all see this impending doom coming for him. So at the end is where it all comes to a head. I won't get into all the details because it's fun to watch it unfold, but he is in very much a situation that our character in Poe is in, and he can see his doom coming, but he can't do anything about it. And it was entertaining to watch. The last episode is called The Raven, which is based off of a poem. So I'm going to read that poem, but I'm also going to read The Fall of the House of Usher, just to see what the original fall of, that's where I started with this whole thing, right? Was to find out how the original Fall of the House of Usher read. So I'm going to read those and then I will check back with you and give you my wrap up. Okay, so I read the poem The Raven, and I think this is probably a poem that most people know about or have heard pieces of, but it is about a man who is suffering the loss of a loved one named Lenore. And one night he's up, he's trying to read just to forget about his misery, and he hears this tapping sound and he can't figure out where it's coming from. He opens the door, there's no one there. Turns out he opens his window and a raven flies in and sits like above his doorway. At first, our main character is kind of amused by this bird and he starts kind of talking to it, just passing the time. And the bird starts responding with one word, nevermore. As time goes on, our character starts talking more and more to this bird, taking it more seriously, asking it questions, serious questions like, will he be reunited with his beloved Lenore when he dies? And the bird just keeps responding, nevermore. So now our character is getting very upset. He thinks that this bird is, you know, a demon or sent from the devil just to torture him, and he just falls further and further into madness, and it just kind of ends in despair and him feeling very depressed and hopeless. This poem is recited during this episode, kind of like a voiceover, different parts of it. We also have our like devil character or our death character who shows up completely dressed gorgeously as a raven. Throughout the whole series, there have been sightings of ravens and just drops of things there. And then of course we have Roderick's granddaughter. Her name is Lenore, and he has, the whole time he has been speaking with this guy that's investigating him, he keeps getting text messages, and every time he looks at his phone, he says like, oh, that's just my granddaughter Lenore. And he never responds to her, never said, you know, you're kind of wondering what she's texting him this whole time. And you do find there is a conclusion to that I will let you find out on your own. And there's just a lot of symbolism within this episode. So this episode is way more than just the Raven. It is actually way more the Cask of Amontillado, where we kind of are finally wrapping up what happened with Madeline and Roderick when they were younger, you know, in their 20s, and they were dealing with Roderick's boss. And the Cask of Amontillado being one of my favorite stories, this really just was perfect for me. We also have them wrapping up the story of the fall of the House of Usher, which is a story about a man who is going to visit an old childhood friend who says he is very sick, and he's like, hey, come visit me, lift my spirits, I'm very ill. And when he gets there, first of all, my favorite part of the story is just him arriving to this house and describing the house from the outside. I won't read the whole thing, but I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain. upon bleak walls, upon a vacant eye like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with utter depression of soul, which I can compare to no earthly sensation more properly than to an after dream of the reveler upon opium, the bitter lapse into everyday life, the hideous dropping off of the veil. There was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought to which no goading of the imagination could torture aught of the sublime. It was like, whoa. And the whole time that Roderick is telling his story, he is in his old Usher home, and it is completely dilapidated and falling apart around them, and there's crazy sounds. And when you come upon the house, like when it zooms in, you definitely see like those windowless eye, or the windows that look like vacant eyes. So that was my favorite part of that story. In that story also, we have our Roderick, who tells our main character that his twin sister Madeline has passed away, that she is in the tomb, like in their family tomb. And as it turns out, in the end, he had buried her alive. So we see a lot of parallels between that story and what happens to our characters in The Fall of the House of Usher, the show, towards the end. And you will not be disappointed. I also realized when I read The Raven, when I was looking through his poems, so one of his poems is named Annabel Lee, which is also the name of Roderick's first wife in the show. And throughout the show, he kind of, whenever he has like little private moments with her, he is reciting this poetry to her, which is this poem. There is also a poem named Tamerlane, which I had forgotten that was the name of his daughter. The name The Raven is actually our main devil character that we see, played by Carla Gugino. Her name, I guess, in this story is actually Verna, which if you switch around the letters of Raven, you get Verna. And I'm sure there are so many other little Easter eggs and things that I just didn't catch the first time watching. I absolutely love this show. Mike Flanagan did an amazing job with this. The visuals were, I thought, top notch. I never really knew what was going to happen, even though I was familiar with a lot of these stories. And I just, as soon as I was finished with it, I wanted to rewatch it. And I'm not a person who really rewatches movies or shows very often. So I absolutely love this show. I really got a lot of enjoyment reading this along with it. And yeah, I can't wait to see what else he creates, because to me, this was a masterpiece and I absolutely loved it. I do also want to point out, I think it was in the last episode, I didn't really mention that Roderick has a new wife, a very young wife, and none of the siblings like her. She is a former drug addict, and of course he has her on his creation Ligadone, which is the non-addicting painkiller. There is a whole scene where she says she wants to come off of this medication, and he's like, good luck with that. And there's a whole conversation about that. He pretty much says that he is Victor Frankenstein and she is the monster, the perfect monster that he has created with his creation Ligadone, which I found very chilling. There's also towards the end of the last episode, when Madeline and Roderick are just drinking and discussing things, they know like this is the end of the road for them, most likely, and she starts discussing like her point of view of why what she does and what they do is not harmful or awful, is because people are asking them for it. I thought that was a very interesting little monologue that she had there. Again, there was probably a million things I didn't catch. So if you caught some correlation between Poe and the show that I did not mention, please let me know down below. If you've watched the show, let me know what you thought of it. I absolutely loved it. And I'm sorry that this turned out so long. I will try to edit it down quite a bit, but I had fun on this journey and I felt like it gave me a reason to read some classic literature that I haven't read in a very long time. So thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay spooky.